300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. I have to ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game. I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malcolm with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Glad you could join me on a jam-packed Monday morning. I have a lot to discuss. The NBA playoffs, of course, Draymond Green's ejection. Was it justified? Was it not? And even a harsh stance taken by Rafael, Nadal, and Novak Djokovic on a recent ban implemented by Wimbledon and their tournament. I'm going to touch on that. But I have to start with the NBA playoffs and specifically with the Golden State Warriors in Game 1. They narrowly edged out the Memphis Grizzlies in Game 1 of the Western Conference semifinals yesterday in Memphis on the road, 117-116. In Game 1 of that series, it's going to be a fantastic series, and obviously that was all set up by that initial one game. That set the tone for what I think this series is going to be. And normally, when you're watching playoff basketball games, because obviously in basketball it's best of 7, baseball can be best of 5, best of 7 as well, NFL it's just 1. In the NBA, oftentimes, most of the games, there's only one side that feels a certain way after the result. There aren't really any moral victories, and most teams don't have multiple positives you can take away from games, whether you're on the winning side or whether you're on the losing side. But I do think that last night or last afternoon, there were a lot of positives that could be said for both the Memphis Grizzlies and the Golden State Warriors, and then some key takeaways. So I want to start with the Golden State Warriors from their perspective. So the fact of the matter is, this is a team that still managed to win Game 1 of the Western Conference semifinals on the road in a hostile environment in Memphis, Tennessee, the former grindhouse, without the emotional services of their emotional leader, their emotional energizer, and their big brother in the middle in Draymond Green. So the fact that they were able to win that game outright after he was lost when he was ejected towards the end of the second quarter, that's a major accomplishment in and of itself. Anytime you can win a major playoff game on the road, technically as the lower seeded team, that's a major accomplishment in and of itself. The other thing is Jordan Poole. This is a guy who continues to emerge as a burgeoning superstar in this league. It almost feels reminiscent to James Harden when he was with OKC the summer before he was ultimately traded to the Houston Rockets. Now, the difference is, I don't think anyone necessarily outside of Daryl Morey saw this type of upside with James Harden. I think we're starting to see Jordan Poole might be one of those guys where if he was to be given his own team, perhaps he might continue to elevate his game. Because even since he has been kind of, if you want to say he's been demoted, quote unquote, to the bench, he hasn't reverted to bench type of production. This is a guy who continues to produce at a really high and a really efficient level. He led the Golden State Warriors yesterday. I was surprised that he wasn't actually the player of the game who normally receives the interview from the national television networks. That was Steph Curry last night. But to be honest, I thought that Jordan Poole arguably was their best player yesterday. He led the team in points with 31. He led the team in assists with 9. He led the team with shots made, field goals made with 12. He led the team in minutes played yesterday with 38. He was tied for the most rebounds with 8. He was tied for the most shots attempted on the team with 20. And he was tied for the most three-pointers made with 5. The guy was doing everything. He also had a couple blocks in there. And yet he was doing this all off the bench. And that's what's been most impressive is you're seeing that it doesn't matter what part of the lineup he's in, if he's a starter, if he's coming off the bench, he's continuing to contribute in a major way that's unparalleled in the NBA right now. What he's providing the Golden State Warriors is entirely unmatched in the NBA, and it is a huge, huge X factor and wild card. I don't even know if you can consider him an X factor anymore, given that he's been averaging for the postseason 22 points with 3 rebounds, 6 assists on 56% shooting, 49% from the three-point line. Incredibly high numbers. And again, the first 2 playoff games of his career against the Denver Nuggets, he dropped like 30 and 29. And then the first game on the road as a lower-seeded team, he drops a playoff career high in 31 points. So he's continuing to be a proven commodity in this league. That's number 2. Number 3, the reassertion of Klay Thompson. He's really starting to find his footing again, both offensively and defensively. He's continuing to improve on both ends of the floor, especially, obviously, we've always known he's been a clutch shot maker. He put that on display again yesterday, hitting the game-winning 3. So that's obviously a really good sign for the Golden State Warriors. Not only could this guy return mentally just to the court after being away for 2 years, but also in the biggest moments of their season, could he deliver the goods like he's been prone to do in the past? And the answer is yes. Now, I know that the caveat to what I just said, there's a counter argument saying, well, Jonah, he missed 2 critical free throws. No question about it. But he did give them the go-ahead three-pointer. I'm going to give him kudos for that. And that's just a major, I think, emotional boost that he provides. The fact that he is returning to that stable, reliable form is something that I think is a really bright spot if you're the Golden State Warriors. That's number 3. Not to mention he also contested Ja Morant's potential game-winning layup attempt. So he hit the clutch shot and he delivered the clutch defensive stop as well, doing it on both ends of the floor. They also out-rebounded the Memphis Grizzlies, who are the number 1 rebounding team in the NBA, despite being undersized and despite playing without Draymond Green. And they still out-rebounded the Memphis Grizzlies by 5. That is a huge win on that checkboard, on that whiteboard for Steve Kerr and his staff. The fact that you've got 3 guards who are under 6'6", and either some combination of Jonathan Kuminga, Gary Payton, Juan Toscano-Anderson with Kevon Looney, and Andrew Wiggins, and they're still out-rebounding one of the bigger teams in Memphis, says a lot. And we'll see if that ultimately makes Taylor Jenkins insert Steven Adams. We still haven't seen. There's still no Steven Adams sighting. It's like he's a Bigfoot. We just don't know where he is. We really don't know where he is. But that's besides the point. Finally, this is a Golden State Warriors team that's starting to return to their championship form. They are starting to reharness and conjure up that championship DNA that had been with them for 5 consecutive seasons. We kind of forget they've been gone for 2 years in the postseason. Now they've come back roaring in this postseason. They're defending at an extremely high level when they need to. That used to be their calling card, and we're seeing more consistent glimpses of that. And what I admire about the Golden State Warriors, not only do I love their personnel, I just think they're likable guys, but I just love watching the way that they play basketball. And I'll touch on that more in a moment. The ball movement, their movement without the basketball. I love their depth. Gary Payton, the second, I didn't realize what type of explosive athlete he was until he posterized Desmond Bane. Whew. The athleticism on that guy, he defends at a high level. So I like what they've been getting from him. And so I kind of was very impressed with the Golden State Warriors on a number of levels because they didn't necessarily have their best games from Steph and from Clay, yet they still managed to win on the road. And I think every single player on that team plays with a type of poise, plays with a type of composure that emanates from the top. They see it. They see it from the top down. Their stars play with a lot of poise, and I think that's trickled down to every single guy on the team. So those are the positives for the Warriors. Now to the Grizzlies. Before I touch on the takeaways, here are the positives. If you're the Memphis Grizzlies, they got off to a much better start than they had pretty much in every single game against the Minnesota Timberwolves. They weren't sleepwalking in their first home game. They came out laser focused. They came out aggressive. They came out hungry from the opening tip to send a message that we're going to be in this series. And we're playing at home, and we are engaged. We're activated. We're ready for this matchup. And that was a really positive sign because in pretty much every game against the Minnesota Timberwolves, they didn't come out quite as laser focused in the open quarter as they needed to be. That's number one. Ja Morant continues to play at an extremely high level. He's still a scintillating basketball player to watch. 34 points, 9 rebounds, 10 assists. And again, he's playing with moxie. He's playing with a brashness that can't be overstated. And it's justified because he backs up the big talk. He continues to run right up the chimney. He's looking for that smoke. He doesn't shy away from it. And that's the thing about the Memphis Grizzlies. Not only are they fearless, but a positive sign was they came out not intimidated against this Golden State Warriors team. They didn't fear them at all. Yes, they came up a little bit short, but the fact of the matter is they were in position to win this basketball game. They lost by 1 at home with the basketball with 3.6 seconds left. They just came up a little bit short. And the other positive for the Memphis Grizzlies is from Dillon Brooks and Desmond Bane, those two guys both scored in single digits. They were combined 3 for 13 from the three-point line, and yet they still only lost by 1 point. Those two guys will likely shoot a little bit of a higher percentage from the floor. So there were a lot of positives for the Memphis Grizzlies. However, and this is what leads into the big takeaway. This was the type of performance from Jaren Jackson where if you're Memphis, you have to win this game. This was the Jaren Jackson game that you're supposed to win. He gave you 33 points, 6 for 9 shooting from the three-point line. He's going to be that difference maker for the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, I'm not predicting that Jaren Jackson is going to ever eclipse 30 points in the series again. He's going to continue to be productive in the series. I don't think he's ever going to give you another 30-point burger in the postseason. And so if you're Memphis, you've got to find a way to win that game. When Jaren Jackson gives you that type of performance, you cannot let that type of performance go to waste. And unfortunately, they did. And it was to be expected at least one game in the series. He was going to have that moment in this postseason. It happened to come in game 1, and they came up a little bit short. That's a concerning sign for Memphis. And this is why ultimately I always kind of liked the Golden State Warriors just a little bit more than Memphis. As great of a season as they've had, everything just seems a little bit more fluid and a little bit more natural for Golden State, especially on the offensive end. The way that they create shots for one another, the way that they execute in their offensive sets, everything just moves a little bit more smoothly and a little bit more, again, naturally than I think than the offense comes for the Memphis Grizzlies. Both sides share the basketball extremely well. They distribute. The Warriors had 31 assists. The Memphis Grizzlies had 26 assists. So the Grizzlies still share the rock just as much as the Warriors. But again, when you look at Golden State, they just have more natural shooters that I think kind of lubricate the offense a little bit more. a little bit more naturally. And I just think when you look at the chemistry, when you look at the trust, their ability to execute, that now the Golden State Warriors, they got three lethal snipers. They got three lethal snipers and playmakers. I just think they're always going to be in a game. And so I just love watching the way that they play basketball, their movement without the basketball. There's a certain elegance and a certain gracefulness that they possess, and yet they still maintain a little bit of that dog mentality, even without Draymond. So Memphis, listen, they're a very resilient team. They're going to continue to come back. They're going to rally just like they did against the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think the problem is the Grizzlies have to play nearly flawless basketball to defeat the Warriors. Whereas I think Golden State can play subpar and still emerge victorious. And that's the big difference here. And so their shooting prowess just allows them to stay into every single game. So I know that this is just one game, and by no means am I saying or suggesting that Memphis is going to get swept. But I do think that this is a series that now favors the Warriors, and I liked them going into this series to win. And now it looks like it's probably going to be a 6-game series where the Warriors will win. But again, game one was fantastic, sets the tone for what promises to be hopefully a tremendous, tremendous series. And I cannot wait for game two. That's going to be an absolute showdown. Okay, so I want to transition to the other interesting takeaway from game one, which was the ejection of Draymond Green. So Draymond Green got ejected with about 2 minutes to go in the second quarter after hard fouling Brandon Clark. Clark was going up for a dunk. Green was swiping for the ball, ended up making a little bit of contact with his face, tugged his jersey, and helped try to cushion his fall. So he was assessed a flagrant 2 foul automatic ejection. His exit off the floor seemed a little bit too jovial and sarcastically kind of petulant to me. He was exuberant on the sidelines, jumping up and down, waving to the fans. It almost was reminiscent of Antonio Brown's final game with the Bucks at MetLife Stadium when the Bucks played the New York Jets. And he was upset reportedly that he had to be inserted back onto the field. And so he took off his shirt and jumping jacked his way, to exit stage left. And we didn't see from him ever again. It had similarities to that event, the way that he exited. So I didn't think that necessarily helped his cause for Draymond Green. I'll just say that. But obviously Green was frustrated by the foul. But I do think that he did make an attempt on the ball, and he did try to cushion the fall of Brandon Clark. Now, that doesn't automatically mean that you should just be given the benefit of the doubt just because you tried to help someone fall to the ground who you pulled down, right? But when you look at what flagrant 2 is, it's excessive and unnecessary behavior. And I didn't think that there was anything that Draymond Green did yesterday that was gratuitous to the point where it warranted a flagrant 2, personally. Now, was I on the receiving end of that blow? So am I waking up this morning feeling ultra sore like I'm sure Brandon Clark is? No. So obviously I can't speak directly to it. But just from a visual standpoint, if you looked at the play specifically, there didn't seem to be any malice intent. Yes, there was a windup, I guess, but I didn't think that he was attempting a strike to the face. And I think that the way that, again, he tried to help guide him down and keep him up, I think shows his intent probably wasn't to just clothesline Brandon Clark, is what I think personally. And he even mentioned, Draymond Green did on his podcast, that he thinks that it's a reputational based thing, or likely a reputational based thing. And I actually kind of agree with him. Now, I'll defend the referees in this regard, because when you look at his history and his past transgressions, it's not just that, okay, his past track record suggests this is a guy who straddles the line. We've known Draymond Green's always straddled the line, but he's always operated within the legal confines of the NBA. But he has accumulated over 130 technical fouls in the course of his career. This was his 12th ejection of his career, which currently ranks in the top 3 all time. The only 2 other guys that have been assessed more ejections, Rasheed Wallace with 29 and DeMarcus Cousins with like 14 or 15. And then there's Draymond Green, who just surpassed Reggie Miller. So I understand the referees not exactly giving Draymond Green the benefit of the doubt. I understand that. And obviously what he showed during that 73-9, 2015-2016 season substantiates and helps corroborate their decision. With his numerous kicks to the groin area of Steven Adams, saw it to LeBron. So I understand where the referees are coming from. And if you're Draymond Green, yes, this was a harsh and punitive response on their end, and I didn't think it was warranted. But at the same time, if you're Draymond Green, you have to know that you're going to be officiated differently. You have to know that you always play on the edge. Your past actions won't kind of give you a longer leash in today's playoffs. You kind of just have to know that, and you have to play accordingly. Now, do I like that the refs to some degree kind of interfered and inserted themselves potentially into the outcome of the game? No, I don't like that. And I don't think that that should ever be the case. Refs should never determine the outcome of a game. And I don't think they necessarily did, but I think they bought themselves a huge pass because the Warriors ultimately won. But had the Warriors lost, there'd be a strong argument to be made from Warriors fans that, hey, we lost the game because you ejected one of our best players. So again, I thought in this particular case, the refs were a little bit quick to blow their whistle. I thought that certainly a flagrant 1 was deserving. Was a flagrant 2, personally, I would have refrained from making that assessment. But again, Draymond Green kind of has to know that he's walking a fine line. And in the postseason, you get about, I think, 4 technical points before you have to serve an automatic 1-game suspension. The flagrant 2 that he was just assessed gives him 2 points. So he's got to be careful moving forward for the rest of the postseason. And it impacted their ability and their chances to win that second consecutive NBA Finals title. We'll see how it comes to potentially bite them later down the road, but he's just got to be cognizant and wary of how he's acting moving forward for this postseason. Got to keep himself in check. Okay. So I want to transition now to the other NBA playoff game, the Eastern Conference semifinals, the Bucks and the Boston Celtics, another highly anticipated matchup. And Giannis and the Bucks traveled to Boston. They began the series against the Celtics without Chris Middleton, and they went to TD Garden on the road and really just dominated the Celtics from start to finish, 101-89. Now, entering these playoffs, I always believed that the Milwaukee Bucks were the best team in the East. And entering the second round of the playoffs, I'd be the first to tell you that the Boston Celtics looked the most impressive from the first round. Of all the teams that played in the first round, the Celtics were the most impressive. Now, had the Milwaukee Bucks been entirely whole and healthy entering this series, I would have predicted the Milwaukee Bucks would beat the Boston Celtics. That's what I had predicted, assuming Chris Middleton was playing. Now, once it was reported that he was out for the entirety of the series, I was a little bit hesitant to make that call. Be the first to say that I was leaning towards the Celtics in 7 games, not because I had any doubt about Giannis or his ability, and it wasn't going to be a referendum against Giannis had the Bucks lost. But I do think that just without Chris Middleton, they lacked a little bit of creative scoring and creative playmaking against a Celtics defense that had just been hellacious and completely smothering the Brooklyn Nets. And so that concerned me. But not for a second did I ever doubt Giannis's ability, or would this have been an indictment against him, kind of like it was against KD for his struggles against the Celtics, and the fact that KD got swept. Now we've kind of knocked him down a peg or two. Because Giannis is the best player in the world. There's no question about that. No question about that. What he brings on both ends of the floor. I'm going to touch on that in a moment. But again, that was it wouldn't have been any doubts of Giannis. But now I'm trumpeting a completely different tune after game one. I think that this is obviously the Milwaukee Bucks' series to lose now. And I like the Bucks moving forward for several reasons. And it's not just the fact that they won, but it was the manner in which they won. Because what we saw from the Milwaukee Bucks is that they've returned to their championship form. They've, again, reharnessed and conjured up that championship DNA. This is a Milwaukee Bucks team that people forget just won the NBA title last season. But they're starting to play that championship caliber defense that we didn't see for most stretches of the year. This was a team that ranked 14th for defensive efficiency and defensive rating all throughout the season. So they weren't even in the top 10. And now through the postseason, they have the highest defensive rating in the NBA. And since game 3 against the Chicago Bulls, they've turned a switch. They've turned a switch and have absolutely obliterated their opponents. They've outscored their opponents by 83 points in the 4 games since game 3. Really, since the conclusion of game 2, starting from game 3 in the Bulls series through the first game against the Celtics. They have absolutely eviscerated every opponent that they have faced along the way. And that speaks to their defense. It's been all sparked by their defense. You've got guys like Grayson Allen and Pat Connaughton and Javon Carter who are picking up guys 94 feet, whether it's Marcus Smart, whether it's Derek White, whether it's Brown, Tatum, whoever is the ball handler bringing it up the floor for the Celtics, they are getting picked up 94 feet. And I'm not saying that Grayson Allen, Javon Carter, and Pat Connaughton are the best individual man-on-man defenders, but the fact that they are picking up guys 94 feet, they are exerting all kinds of pressure on the Celtics, and they're just having to make them work. They're making them work for it. And that's what the Celtics were doing against the Brooklyn Nets, because the Milwaukee Bucks just out-toughed them, out-physicaled them, out-muscled the Boston Celtics yesterday. And unfortunately for the Celtics, I don't necessarily see that trend changing. Now, I'm not saying that the Celtics can't kind of give them a little taste of their own medicine to the Bucks, but this is going to be a long series for them, because you've got Jrue Holiday, who has returned to his elite defensive form, continuing to put on the clamps. And I always love about Jrue Holiday is not just kind of stoic demeanor and his natural disposition when he plays. We've obviously known he's always one of the best two-way players in the NBA, and I think I've made this claim before. I think that he was instrumental in Team USA winning the gold medal. I thought he was arguably their second or third best player for what he provided. And again, what I love about the way that he defends, because he defends differently than other guys. He gets up into Jason Tatum and to Jaylen Brown. He takes away their airspace. He hugs on them. He doesn't allow the screener to allow Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown to go middle. He cuts off the middle. He forces them down the sideline. He fights over the screens. He stays attached to their hips. He doesn't just kind of acquiesce and say, oh, okay, can't fight over the screen. Time for you to switch. That's not what he's made of. And he did a number on both of those guys yesterday. The Celtics players were a combined 4 of 13 when Jrue Holiday was the primary defender. Jason Tatum dropped 21 points on 6 for 19 shooting. Jaylen Brown was 4 of 13, only had 12 points. Jrue Holiday did a number on those guys, and he still contributed 25 points on the other end, the leading scorer in the game. So I love what he's bringing to the table, but the difference in this series is the size. The Celtics aren't going to have the advantage in the interior, on the boards, on the glass, like they did against the Brooklyn Nets. This is a big, massive Milwaukee Bucks team. You got Giannis, who's 6'11". You've got Brook Lopez, who is 7 feet. You've got Bobby Portis, who is a legit 6'10". And they've got great rebounding guards in Jrue Holiday and Connaughton and Grayson Allen, these guys can rebound the basketball. So from the interior, that's an advantage for the Milwaukee Bucks. The Celtics aren't going to have as many second chance points like they did against the Brooklyn Nets. And the fact that Chris Middleton's not even out there and he's 6'8", 6'9", just shows you still the type of depth and the type of height that the Bucks possess. So I love Giannis. Such a likable guy. I love everything about him. I love what he's made of. He is the model superstar. He is everything you'd want in a superstar. He has God-given ability and talent. Just look at the alley-oop to himself. How many guys can do that with such ease like he did in the NBA? And the fact that he remained stoic after the dunk just shows you how confident and how much swagger he's playing with. He's humble. He's driven. He's extremely hardworking. And he's constantly trying to improve. He's impervious to failure. He embraces it. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what really resonates with people, is the fact that here you have an imperfect guy who doesn't shoot it necessarily well, especially from the free throw line, but every single offseason, he doesn't shy away from his flaws. He acknowledges what he needs to get better at, and he embraces the misses and doesn't shy away from it in the postseason. And the fact that you've got an imperfect athlete who understands and acknowledges he's imperfect and embraces it and is still delivering the goods in the highest moment, that's something that people appreciate. And so he's an extremely likable guy. Obviously, what he brings for you on the defensive end speaks for himself. He's been given the moniker the Greek Freak for a reason. He's a freak athlete, but an incredible person. And again, I just think that he's a model superstar. He's taken his lumps and bruises, but he's managed to steady and captain the ship amidst all this turbulence over the past several years. He stayed with his organization, and he didn't flee to join another super team. He provided his organization with patience. The organization returned the favor. They went out and made one legitimate trade, acquiring Jrue Holiday. And both of their patience paid dividends because Giannis rewarded them with their first NBA title in 50 years since 1971. So I just love everything about Giannis. And it seems to be at this moment in time like he is the new NBA it guy that's wearing the cloak of invincibility. This guy seems to be wearing the armor that can't be punctured. And when he's playing, when he's on the court, he just instills this belief. He infuses and imbues this confidence in his team that he's just not going to lose a basketball game when he's actually fully committed on every single possession. I think they took the Bulls a little bit too lightly in the first two games. They've flipped the switch, and they are in Mamba mode for the remainder of this postseason. And I just love. I mean, they were a plus 23 with him on the floor yesterday and a minus 11 without him. That speaks volumes. And so, again, the Celtics actually defended him well. They defended him about as well as you could, going 9 for 25. They showed a lot of bodies, and yet he was still too overpowering. So I was super impressed with the Bucks. I mean, the Celtics were 18 of 50 from the three-point line. I will acknowledge I don't think they're going to struggle like that every single game of the series, even though they were kind of baited into shooting a lot of those threes. They will hit more of those. But I think that the Celtics are in a heap of trouble because unlike the Nets, where if Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are struggling, their defense can create offense because the Nets played such porous defense. That's not the case with the Bucks. They are an elite defensive team. They've returned to that form. And I think that the Bucks are now in prime position to win this series in 6 or less. I really do. And again, I know it might seem like an overreaction. It's not just the fact that they won, but how they did it was extremely impressive. And I think they just became the new favorites. I really do. Okay. Final topic before my Malkin's moments, a quick tennis topic. This was a massive story that just came out about couple days ago over this weekend. One of the major Grand Slam tournament events, Wimbledon, that takes place every year in England. They just came out and enforced a ban on Russian and Belarusian tennis players from playing at this year's Wimbledon tournament. And Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic spoke out against it. They criticized Wimbledon in Madrid in preparation for the Madrid Open. Now, obviously, this is all following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That's what was the impetus for the ban. And Nadal and Djokovic spoke out against it and demonstrated and vocalized their support for their Russian and Belarusian colleagues. And let me first say that I actually commend Nadal and Djokovic, two of the most prominent athletes in the sport, for speaking out on and vocalizing their opinions on a really sensitive and delicate issue. Because when you look at kind of the geopolitics, you have a Spanish and a Serbian athlete vocalizing their opinions. You don't really know what the ramifications are going to be based on their opinions, how their countries are viewed in the eyes of NATO and the US versus Russia. So the fact that they felt comfortable enough expressing how they feel, I commend those two, because it's important that two prominent figures in the sport support their colleagues. That's first of all. But this is a massive ban. When you first look at the Russian athletes who this impacts, you're talking about Daniil Medvedev, who's the number 2 ranked tennis player in the world. He's the defending U.S. Open champion. You have Andrei Rublev, a top 10 tennis player on the men's side. You've got Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova, who was the French Open runner-up not too long ago. Then on the Belarusian side, you have Sabalenka, who's a top 10 player, Victoria Azarenka, who's won a couple Grand Slams. These are some major absentees from this year's tournament. Major. And so, to me, it almost reminds me of the 1936 Olympics that were held in Berlin. Obviously, it was a little bit different in that the Olympics preceded World War II, but as far as just the political impact and significance of that Olympics, it rings true once again now. And so I feel really badly for these Russian and Belarusian athletes that they are subjected to this. Now, Djokovic came out and tried to draw the comparison between how those athletes must be feeling to when he was prohibited from playing at the Australian Open due to his unvaccinated status and the fact that he was immune to COVID. I disagree with that. That was a personal choice. That was self-inflicted. That was different. These athletes, this was completely out of their control. They can't control what their nationality is. They can't control where they're born. This ban was just enforced, and there's nothing they can do about it. And so I'll be honest, this is a very, very difficult, a very fragile and complex situation, because I think that there truthfully are strong arguments on both sides. On the one hand, I completely empathize with the players, and I think it's not fair and it's unjust for them to be held accountable for their country's actions. From my understanding, none of those athletes have demonstrated support for Russia's military invasion. In fact, Andrei Rublev wrote on a camera at the Dubai Tennis Championship, "No war, please," trying to promote the message of peace. So to deny those athletes from the esteemed privilege and honor of being a chance to be a participant in this Wimbledon tournament is a shame, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. It's a shame that they've had to kind of be made pawns and sacrificial lambs in this instance, and uh, that they're taking the brunt end. They're wearing the brunt end of this from their countries. It's unfair. It's unjust. And so I empathize with the players. That's one perspective. On the other hand, I also understand where England is coming from and where the tournament is coming from, because they're wanting to send a powerful message that we condemn and we detest and loathe violence, and we don't support this invasion and this military attack, and we do not want to offer any opportunities for celebration or praise for any athlete that originates from that country. And it's bigger than sports. And this is about sending a worldwide message. And I understand that perspective too. I do understand that perspective as well. So I wish that there was some kind of compromise that could be reached. But unfortunately, I understand both sides of the argument. I do. And it's going to have huge impact on what the French Open does, because now the French Open can't just be sitting ducks and say, well, Wimbledon did this, so what is our course of action going to be? Because now if you have France that comes out and bans Russian and Belarusian athletes, now what does the US Open do? What does the Australian Open do? So I think that as long as this kind of war persists, now that England has taken this stance at Wimbledon, who knows what dominoes will continue to fall after this. So this was a major story that really wasn't touched on a lot. It's a tough situation. It's a really tough situation. It's a shame that we as tennis fans are deprived of seeing some of these incredible athletes play. And obviously there are more athletes than just those five that I named. Those are the more prominent ones. But I'll be curious to see what happens in the next couple of weeks, if their stance changes, what happens. But for the moment, this is a major story. Major story. Okay, final topic of the day, my Malkin's moments. I have some great Malkin's moments for you. Always my favorite segment of the day. So I have to start with Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks. Giannis collected his second playoff triple-double of his career. He had 24 points, 13 rebounds, 12 assists yesterday in the Milwaukee Bucks' Game 1 Eastern Conference semifinals win over the Boston Celtics on the road yesterday, 101-89. Giannis did the first player in Bucks franchise history with multiple career playoff triple-doubles. He collected his first playoff triple-double in Game 4 of the 2021 first round playoff series against the Miami Heat. He dropped 20 points, 15 rebounds, and 12 rebounds, and 15 assists in that contest. So major shout out to Giannis continuing to back up his best player in the world status. Major shout out to him and the Bucks for taking Game 1. The NFL draft took place last weekend, commenced over the weekend back on Thursday. The Georgia Bulldogs had an historic draft. The reigning national champions in college football. They had 5 players drafted in the first round of the NFL draft on Thursday. They had 5 first-round defensive picks in particular, which are the most ever from one school. In fact, Georgia set a NFL record with 15 players drafted in the NFL draft altogether. That's the most of all time. So major shout-out to Kirby Smart and his program. Major accomplishment for that school. That says a lot about the type of talent that they had. Transitioning to baseball, the LA Dodgers' ace, Clayton Kershaw, set a record in Dodgers history, etched his name in Dodgers history. He became the Dodgers' all-time strikeouts leader officially. Did Clayton Kershaw after collecting his 2,697th strikeout of his career. It came against the Detroit Tigers yesterday. Clayton Kershaw, this is a guy who not only he broke a 43-year-old record that had been held by Don Sutton for 43 years. And when you think about Clayton Kershaw and what he's meant to this organization, 8 All-Star selections, 3 times he's been named the NL Cy Young winner. Now he adds a World Series champion and title to his resume. He bleeds Dodger white and blue, and this is a guy who's from Texas and yet has been embraced by LA and the city and this community. And it's great to have him as a Dodger. It's great that he has been able to leave an indelible mark on this franchise and in the sport of baseball. He was congratulated by a lot of greats: Orel Hershiser, Vin Scully, a bunch of Don Sutton's son left the message. So numerous guys left the message for him. AJ Ellis, former players. Very, very touching tribute to him. He received a major ovation at Dodger Stadium over the weekend, and it was just great to see, and major congratulations to Kershaw. And finally, big shout out to the Golden State Warriors' head coach Steve Kerr for moving up to 9th place on the NBA's playoffs all-time coaching wins list. It came after the Golden State Warriors beat the Memphis Grizzlies in Game 1 of the Western Conference semifinals yesterday, 117-116. Steve Kerr is continuing to prove why he is a really, really good head coach in this league. That's all the time that I got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me right here on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe, J-O, with Jonah Malkin on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah_Malkin or at morning_Joe_. Follow me on Instagram, JMalk97, TikTok, Jonah Malkin. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.